So designers have helped shape, well, the most successful products on the planet, but almost none of us are founders. Why? Well, I believe it's not because of the lack of talent. It's because our design community culture and design education were almost designed to keep us in the supporting role. So what I'll share in this video is based on my experience of having worked with over 1,000 designers all over the world, and also being a design founder myself for well over 8 years now. So in this video, I want to show you and share with you why designers have been left out of the founding story so far, why that's about to change, and well, one mindset that we need to make that leap. So let's jump in. I prepared a Miro board so we can go through it. So we have the 3 buckets. Let's jump into why aren't there more design founders. So I believe that one of the things that has happened over the last 20, 30 years since the rise of the startup culture is that, well, designers were not starting companies. We were not starting companies ourselves, but we were also not crucial. So we were not being invited by people who were starting companies. And the best way to explain this is through the Venn diagram that we are so familiar with. Obviously, there's 3 buckets: feasibility, viability, desirability. And usually we would say, hey, we take care of desirability, developers or whatever the person or engineers, whoever is needed for feasibility part. If you're making hardware, maybe it's engineers. If you're making software, it's developers. And then you obviously need some business peeps, marketing, sales, and so on. So what has happened is that usually, we were not the ones starting companies, and I'll touch why I think that is in a bit. But actually it was these people. It was engineers, it was marketing people, business people. And usually the idea they had for a startup came out of their own experience, out of the problem they have all observed themselves, which means they were basically bringing the desirability perspective into the idea from day one. So they didn't need design to bring the user centricity and human centeredness. And you typically don't want to bring to the founding team something that you can later buy on the market, which is design skills, which is doing user research, usability, testing, wireframes, brand, and so on. You just want to bring in what you actually cannot survive with from the day one. And in this case, it was very rarely or never the design perspective that was needed when companies were created. So that's all just to say that we were not invited to the founding teams because we were not seen as, crucial. At the same time, we were not starting companies ourselves. I believe this is because of the combination of the culture and the curriculum of design schools. First of all, if you look at our culture, basically you see that the things that are being celebrated are design awards, titles in the top tech companies, and dribble likes. You sharing your portfolio, people liking your portfolio. That was worth more than business success, being a founder, or making some revenue with your startup. And I'm generalizing here, but if you really think about the designers that you are surrounded with, you can just get this feeling that, the business world and the startup world, there is like a wall between us and the business community. And that has a lot to do with also schools, design schools, and the curriculum. There's just a big focus on the craft, and there's a lot of value. Well, there's a lot of criticism of the business world and capitalism, rightfully so. But at the same time, we're not being taught how to maybe change that. We're not being taught the business skills. Let me just highlight this. So we're not being taught the business skills, right? We're only being taught design skills. We're being taught to focus on our craft. And that in itself is keeping us even more in this supporting role than in the, hero role, let's call it. So the role where we can actually start a company, found a company, build a story the way we think it needs to be built. So I think this combination of the culture of design community and the curriculum of design schools is keeping us away from starting companies. And at the same time, I explained why I think the people who are starting companies aren't inviting us to the table to be the co-founders. So why I believe now might be the time for more designers to start companies. Well, I think we have matured as a community, and at the same time, technology has matured to the extent that it's pushing us into founding companies and it's enabling us at the same time. So if we just think, I don't know, 5, 7, 10 years back, that was the golden age of design. There was a lot of demand, very little supply. So you could command higher salaries, you could easily get jobs, and so on. And there are two forces squeezing us almost in our roles, and that's, I mean, if you have a job, there's two roles squeezing you. One is obviously the AI, which can take a lot of the execution layer. It can just design things that we have designed before. But there's also more and more designers entering the field. So we have more supply, and then we have less need because of the AI. So that's squeezing the importance of design. I do believe design is going to be very important, but the current macroeconomic trends are not in the favor of people who have jobs as designers. Another thing we have learned as a community and also individually is that it's very hard to make the change within the company. What I mean with this is a lot of us go into companies, go and have jobs because we want to change things, because we want to bring that like human centered, user centered perspective to the company and explain that, hey, let's not do everything just for, ROI and profit and revenue. Let's build a long-term story. Let's build a brand. Let's do something that's good for the users. And you have probably noticed that that doesn't land. People within the companies, I mean, they're being governed by numbers, by spreadsheets. They don't care about these arguments. So if you really want to change something, change the culture of business, create a different type of business, different type of product, you just cannot do this meaning you cannot do this by being hired into the company. It's very, very rare, at least. But it's much easier to do this outside, meaning start your own company, because there you're creating from scratch your own utopian perspective of how a product, a company needs to feel like, and what the user experiences. And yeah, you can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the business, meaning you make more money than it costs you to generate that value. You can create the most utopian, dystopian, beautiful type of story. And I believe that's what drives a lot of designers. And that's just on the other side of that fence, not waiting for somebody to give into our hands, the tools to be able to change things, but to actually, go outside and build that. So you might be also saying, yeah, but, we are living in the age of AI. Isn't now harder to start a company? Actually, essentially, it is easier to start a company for sure. There's more competition for sure as well. But I think there are certain forces that make us designers actually put us in a better position to start a company. So what has gotten easier with AI is obviously writing code. So if you have an idea that is software related, just much easier to actually build this yourself. It's also, unfortunately, what has gotten easier is designing screens, which was a big chunk of what a lot of designers have done in companies, wireframes, UI, and so on. Writing copy has definitely gotten easier. Also, desk research, business research has gotten easier, right? So there's a lot of tasks, executional tasks that have gotten easier. But what paradoxically has gotten, and it will get even harder, is deciding what gets built. Because when you live in the environment where building is easy, deciding what gets built is the hard part, right? So it's the strategic lens and also having the feeling, intuition, and also data to know what actually people want. Not just what we can build, but what makes sense to build. And I think designers have a very good perspective for that, because we are user-centered, human-centered. We are trained to really understand what people want, how they think, and that will be the dominant perspective that computers will not have. Even though, they can scrape comments and so on, but it's still not the same as talking to a people and really understanding what's going on right now in the market and within that community. So what's going to get harder is steering AI, steering the technology to build the stuff that it actually needs to get built instead of what it can just build. And a very important part of that is going to be taste. And taste is something I might talk about in the next video because it's a very elusive term. But let's just, for the sake of the argument, say that we designers have been trained to really very quickly having a look at a product or having a look at, and I'm not just talking about software product, I'm obviously also talking about physical products here as well. But there's just something that we have a taste where we can quickly understand when technology, AI generates something, if it's good or bad. And many people do not have that. They might be using these tools and they just might be happy with subpar results. So I think these two parts are getting harder, and it's something that designers are in a really good position to do. What hasn't gotten easier and will not get easier is standing out, which is the marketing part. That was always hard and it will always stay hard, but it's just something that every founder needs to learn. So marketing and distribution. So if we just look at this row, like why now is the time, what I see is just somehow almost like a push from the macroeconomic perspective. So what's happening on the job market, how we have also, developed as a community, what lessons we have as a community gotten over the last 10, 15 years, and also the technological push are all really basically pushing us, not pushing us, but like suggesting to us that, hey, now is the time to start companies, because all the stuff that we want, which is the impact, which is creating a different kind of future, are behind this decision that, hey, we don't need to just have jobs, we can also found companies. And actually we are in a good position to found companies. Now, I think what we have to do as a community in order to get better at launching companies is, we need to add some new skills, obviously, right? Not just design, but we need to learn business skills, and we need to also learn how to build products, which could be done with vibe coding or anything else. But I think what is really lacking is not just like the skills, but it's the mindset. And I want to spend just a few minutes on the most important mindset that I see a lot of designers struggle with, and not just designers, but like people going from a job to starting a company, which is this, what I call from perseverance to perfection. Well, actually, from perfection to perseverance. And what I'm trying to say here is perseverance is way more important in the game of entrepreneurship than perfection. And if you had a job for 5, 10 years, even 2 years, you've basically been trained to think in the perfectionism sense. Meaning, you don't want to launch something that's not great. You don't want to launch something that might break, because then customers obviously will complain, they will flood the customer support, so that's not good. Not for the business, not for the users. And we are being trained to basically polish things, to make them perfect, to, tweak them, to bring them to something that feels like, okay, I love that. And what happens if you take the same mindset from having a job to being an entrepreneur is, and I see this a lot, is you have an idea and then you start working on this idea, you're improving it, shaping it, iterating, all the way until it feels perfect. And that usually takes 6 months to 12 months. It might even take 2 years. And most people actually never launch anything because they don't have the time or energy, in addition to having a job, to be able to also build something that's perfect and they're proud of. And that's keeping a lot of people basically away from starting a company. Because the game of business, or the main game of entrepreneurship, is basically a game of perseverance. So the rule of thumb in the business or entrepreneurship game is that when you're launching a new business, you have roughly 10% chance to succeed. So meaning you have 90% chance to fail. But if we just look at the math of this, right? If I only try once, which is on my graph somewhere here, right? If I only try once, my chance of success is 10%, okay? But, and this is math, this is not me making up. If you actually try something with 10% chance of success for 5 times, you go from 10% chance to 41% chance. 41, okay? If you do it 10 times, you get to 65% chance. Meaning, if you just commit to launching 10 things, launching 10 ideas that you have, instead of just launching one, you go from being way more likely to fail to way more likely to succeed, right? 65% chance of succeeding. And if you actually tried 15 times, it's 79% chance. And this is just math. So in my view, the perfect way to launch something, if you really want to launch it, is to say, hey, I really want to be a founder and I have a lot of ideas and I'm open to what the right idea is. Let me just launch 10 things over the next 10 months. Okay? And that might seem extreme, but again, I have recorded another video that explains how you can do this. But this is the mathematical way to succeed in this game, in becoming a founder. And I know this myself because before I have launched the DMBA, which is my successful, the only successful business project. Well, I had a few semi-successful, but the only really successful business project that I had, the only profitable over the long term, called DMBA, which is a business school for designers. I have launched 15 things. I have a list. I have launched 15 things before launching the MBA. So 15 failures for one success. And it took me 15 years to figure this mathematical equation out. So I was launching one thing in a year and just took way too much time. So if you are someone who would just love to go from having a job to having its own business, the right way to think about it is, okay, I need to launch multiple things. With each new launch, I will be learning something new. I do need to learn maybe some new skills from the feasibility bucket and viability bucket based on what your idea is about. I need to change how I measure my success from design awards to becoming a founder and having a profitable business. And I just want to say that if you are on this path and trying to do this, I will be putting together a community for people who want to become design founders. And you can check the link below this video. It should be in the description and in the very first comment. And maybe you can join me and others on this path, and we can together, just have more designers start companies. I'm really frustrated that we're not doing this because we have a lot of the skills. And I think we also have just a different perspective on how the world should look like and how the business world should feel and how the company should be run. And honestly, the only way we can do this at mass, that more of us can do this, is by just starting our own companies. So I hope we can start a trend here and we can just be launching these companies. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you step on this path, whether you join the community or not. And I'll be recording more videos like this. So see you in the next one. Bye-bye.